Hey CSC 200, welcome to part 2 of EX3 Pitchers, working with the Pirates pitchers and making a new table that's related to the first table. And we have our first table, players, right now, that has all the players on the team, and we're going to be making a second table which is just the pitchers, kind of a subset table. And all that we have to do is, when we're in our looking at our database and looking at our tables, is we're just going to add a new table, and we're going to call this just pitchers. Just lowercase pitchers, and we're going to keep 4 columns, and we're just going to hit go. The first column we're going to make is going to be called pitcher ID, because we do have a player ID, but these are going to be specific to the pitchers. These are going to be unique to the pitchers, but they will still have a player ID. So for this particular table, you should have a primary key. You should have an identifier in the table that is unique to all the members of this table, and that's going to be pitcher ID. So that'll be different than player ID, and it's still going to be integer, and we're going to just put 11, and then if you scroll over, you could check AI, which is auto increment, and that'll indicate it to be the primary key, and I'll hit go. So that's our primary key right now. And now for these, what we're going to do for these is we're going to pick these up from the central columns, and hopefully they should come up when you added them to the central columns earlier. So I'm going to pick this up. The first one I'm going to use is going to be ID, and that's the player ID. Now you could change the name of this if you want. If you wanted to call this player ID, you could call this player ID. Even though you picked it from the central column, you could call it that, and everything else stays pretty much the same. You should go here and just give it an index. That indexes it, where you hit go. The next one we're just going to pick up from central columns. We're going to use first, and then for this one we're going to use last. So that just picks, that doesn't pick all the players, it just picks the columns, so you don't have to recreate those columns. So what we have now is a 4-column table, and I'm going to hit save. Now all that we're going to have right now, when you look at pitchers, if I click on pitchers and I hit browse, this is all I have. I don't have anything in there. And what we want to do is we want to add the pitchers in there. Now you could manually add them. If you wanted to manually add them, you could go to insert, and you could find the player ID. They'll actually have a player ID. Actually, we didn't create it as a foreign key, so we have to do that first. But you could manually add each pitcher in there. Now we don't want to do that, so we're going to go back to our structure. And one thing we're going to do here is set up a foreign key. That means that it'll pull the key of player ID, or the ID that we had from the other table, into here, so that they're kind of sharing that, and that kind of makes it related. That'll make kind of what's called the relational database. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to relation view, and in here in relation view, while we're in this table for pitchers, we're going to basically say that player ID is going to be our one that's kind of borrowing. That's going to be the one that's going to be the foreign key. That's going to be the one that's using the key from the first table, and this is from this database, and it's getting it from the players. And the column the column that it's getting it from is going to be ID. So our new column, which is player ID, is going to be basically getting it from the database, from the players table, and from the ID column. That'll link it up as a foreign key. Now, one thing that we want to have in here is, it says on delete restrict, and we'll talk about this in detail later, but right now we're just going to put cascade. Cascade means that if you make a change in the parent, it'll cascade in the child, and we're working in the child right now. Pitchers is going to be the child, so that way if you delete a player, he'll delete in the pitchers, but if you delete a pitcher, it will not delete in the players, because maybe he's changing position for whatever reason. So that's how we set up a foreign key, and we'll do more of that, but all we had to do is basically indicate what column we're talking about, and then where that key is coming from, and then we're just going to hit save. What we're going to do next is go back to browse. Now we mentioned here that we could manually add them. Now if I just go to insert again, this wasn't here last time because we didn't have the foreign key, but what we could do is you could basically pull the ID of a particular pitcher. So if you knew that Kent Tekulve was 33, you could put 33 in here, and you could kind of add them and then put their names. But again, that would be very inefficient by doing that. So what we want to do is find a way that we can basically bring the information in. And I looked at a couple different ways, and then finally I went to W3 Schools, and they have something. Now this is in the SQL tutorial, and this is way down. They have something called Select Into. And this is very helpful because it says when you want to copy data from one table to another. That's exactly what we want to do. And on the second page of this, which is called Insert Into Select statement, they have a special statement. They basically, if I scroll down here, they use this kind of this Northwind database that they use in here, and they have a statement which is exactly what we want. They basically want to insert into one table from another table and pick out specific columns. So this is kind of where I got this from. Now I have something for you that you can use. Now I put this up on Documents and Resources, and I'm going to let you use this so you don't have to find it and try to switch it around. But I put this thing called picturequery.txt. Now if you just click on this in eLearning, since it's a text file, it should open up just separately, and you could copy it right out of here. And I'm going to copy it. I'll just do a Command C. Since I'm working on a Mac, I'm going to copy it, and I'll go back to MAMP, and I'll get out of here. I don't want to be in here right now. What I want to do in here is go to SQL, and I'm just going to highlight this, and I'm going to run a query. Now let me just explain this query before we run it. What it's going to do, it's going to insert into Pictures, which is the table that we're in. It's going to insert the ID first, last, the first and last name, and we're going to be selecting ID first, last. Now I changed this a little bit, so I'm actually going to have to change this one. I'm going to make this player ID. So I'm going to put that in there so that's player ID. But we're going to be selecting ID because I changed the name of it. I could have just kept it the same. That would have been more, I guess, easier to follow. But I'm going to select ID first and last from players, and I'm also going to select them where position equals pictures. So I'm only selecting the pictures, and I'm going to put them into player ID. So it's matching up ID and player ID first and last. So I told you I could change the name here. I should have just kept it ID, but that'll work too. And what's happening in his queries, it's basically inserting into the pictures table the information from the players table, and I'm even choosing specific columns and matching these up. So if you have 3 up here, there should be 3 down there. And you might say, well, what about the picture ID? Well, I don't need that because it's an auto-incrementing number, so I don't have to use that. It'll create that automatically. But I do want to pull the ID from the other table, and I want to pull their first and last name. That's all I want right now. So I'm going to hit go, and we'll see if this works. And it sounds good so far. We didn't get an error. And now when I go look at it, when I browse, I'll see that my table is now populated with picture ID, and it also has player ID. Picture ID is the auto-incremented number that we created, and player ID links up to the other table. So you can actually, if you wanted to find more information about Don Robinson, you could click on his player ID. It's actually hyperlinked, and then it goes back and it pulls up the information from the player table. So it creates kind of a cross-reference. Now this is all their hitting information. And the whole idea of a pitcher's table would be to have, pitcher stats, wins, losses, strikeouts, all the other pitching stats. We're not going to put that in right now. But at least what we're doing is creating kind of a relational database. So that ID that's in the pitcher's table is actually related to the ID that's in the player's table. So if I go back to that, I'll hit browse again. And let me go back to my pitchers. And just for example, just what I wanted to point out here was that if let's say I wanted to get rid of one of these, or let's say somebody just left the team, got cut from the team. Let's say it's this Paul Moscow guy. He got cut from the team. He would be cut from players first because he's one of the players. So let's say you wanted to delete him, and I want you to do this. So delete Paul Moscow. We're going to go down and find Paul Moscow. We're going to find Paul Moscow, who's 38 here, and we're just going to delete him. And I'll hit OK. And if I go to Pictures, he should be deleted from Pictures. So let me go to Pictures. He should be wiped out of the Pictures table, and there's no more Paul Moscow, because basically because it's a relational database, if he's a player, he can't be a pitcher. Now, if I delete a pitcher, let's say I'm going to delete Enrique Romo. we're going to delete him from the pictures, and I'll hit OK. Now if he was deleted from the pictures, he'll still be in players. I should still go back to my players and browse, and I should still find Enrique Romo in there, and I should have checked his number so I don't have to scroll here. But there he is, Enrique Romo. So he's still part of this table because he didn't get deleted as a player, he only got deleted as a pitcher. And that doesn't necessarily mean, that he's deleted from the team. Maybe he changed positions. It can happen. So that's kind of how a relational database works. So all that I want you to do is basically delete Paul Moscow. I think that was his name. I want you to delete him, and then I want you to delete him from players, and then I want you to delete Enrique Romo from pitchers, just to see how that works, just to see how these foreign keys work. And again, just to review a little bit, if you go to relation view for the pitchers, you can see here's our foreign key setup, and it even has this thing, FK means foreign key for pitchers. It basically means that that in our player ID column, we're using the players table, the ID from the players table. So that's a foreign key. That means they're linked together. And you could set up a bunch of foreign keys. Just picture for what we're doing now. Picture, you're selling a bunch of things and then a bunch of things go on sale. And maybe you have a separate table that are sale items. Well, the sale items would still be part of the items that were part of our inventory. It's just they're a little bit different and they might have a different price. So that's kind of what we're doing, is just creating like a subset. Our pitchers table is kind of a subset. So that's all we're doing right now. So that's all you have to do is just create that. Make sure you got your central columns working and that you set up your foreign key, and I'll have written instructions for all this. And then when you're done, what you're going to do is you're just going to go back to your databases. Let me go back to here. And when I'm on the database, this is when I should click export, because then when you do that, you'll only see the table that you want. See, it's only showing the pitchers and players. Those are the ones you want. So make sure you click on your database before you do export. That's probably the better way to do that. Pitchers and players are showing up as the tables that are being exported. And you don't have to rename anything here. You already renamed it. You are going to make sure you choose Save Output to File. And as you scroll down, the only other things that we checked were these add and drop check marks there, and that was like we did last time, and there shouldn't be anything else to do. Now when you hit go, right now what's going to happen is it's going to get downloaded into your downloads folder. So if you hit go, it'll get downloaded, and if you put your name on it, then it should be easy to find. But then once you go into your downloads folder, now when I clicked on it, it opened up the actual SQL file. I don't want to do that. But if I go to my downloads and I find it, there it is. This is the one I downloaded. I can actually, zip this right away if I wanted to, or you can move it into your files, move it into your sample files. You might just want to zip it right away. On a Windows, you would do send to and then compress it. On a Mac, you could basically just right click and just say compress. And then this is the one that you're basically going to upload. I mean, you could actually leave it in your downloads and just upload it, but you probably want to copy it and get it to your folder of where your stuff's at. All right, so that's the one I would do, the one that has my name on it, because the one I downloaded didn't have my name, but this has my name now because I changed it. Now this file, this Pirates 1982 Pitchers Homa SQL zip, is the one I want to upload. When it's time to upload it, what you're going to do is you're going to basically go to coursework, and now when you want to upload it, you're going to go to EX4, or not EX4, it's EX3, but it's Unit 4, and you're going to click on that assignment, and you're just going to say upload file, and you're going to choose it, and then make sure it has to be the zip file. It can't be the SQL, and I'm going to find the right one. Now, obviously, I have a lot of ones that look the same in here, but I'm going to look for the one that has my name on it. This is the one that has my name on it. I'm going to choose that. I'll hit open, and then I'll hit insert. They made this more confusing. And then I'll hit add file. And then make sure you click on here to turn it in. So that's how you're going to turn it in. So that's the last part of that. So then I'll have a copy of your database with your name in. And then what I do is I import it in. I just take a look at it and make sure everything was okay with your database. So that should be it. There'll be written instructions to accompany this that will hopefully help out a little bit more. And that will kind of review just a little intro of relational databases by using a foreign key and using central columns to help us out a little bit.